When Adrian Newey speaks, the motoring world tends to listen. The technical guru who has the same amount of championships as Fangio and Schumacher combined has been speaking out about his experience leaving Red Bull recently, and has been letting slip some information that we're not sure Red Bull will be too happy about. It would seem that the Milton Keynes team have been ensuring that they protect their own best interests while letting a core component of their success walk out the door, and they haven't made life at all comfortable for the ex-team car designer, even going as far as to ensure that Newey has the slowest start possible at his new home in Silverstone at Aston Martin. But why is that? Is it simply part and parcel of the F1 industry to make the long, slow goodbye as painful as possible? Or could it be that Red Bull can sense a greater threat coming from Silverstone that they will do anything in their power to prevent? Want to know why Red Bull have made life as hard as possible for Adrian Newey? Is this just a spiteful breakup, or is there potentially some trouble brewing in Milton Keynes, and they want to lock the doors before anyone else can make an escape? So this past week has seen Adrian Newey be more candid about his Red Bull exit, with it likely being that some kind of no-talk agreement period has come to a close at the turn of the new year. He's been discussing everything from the upcoming start at Aston Martin in March to some pretty bitter tastes left in his mouth about how his time at Red Bull came to a close. So I think it's important that we break it down piece by piece, as it could well shed light on some pretty devious Red Bull strategies. So let's start with the most fair before moving on to perhaps the most shady. The obvious place to start is the terms of Newey's gardening leave, which, as expected, starved the car designer of some pretty key tools necessary to design Formula 1 cars. After it being proposed to Newey that Red Bull couldn't prevent him from thinking about his next steps at Aston Martin, he had this to say: "No, they can't, but they've blocked my tools. So obviously, Aston wants to do the best job they can in 25, but my main kind of focus will be the 26 regulations and this big change because I start on March the 2nd. The aero rules come out, I think, 1st of January, or might be the 2nd, whatever the working day is. So I'll already be kind of 2 months behind the curve, but in truth, of course, it's more than that, because not only will I be behind on looking at those regulations compared to when they've come out, with the way that the regulations have gone, you really need to be in front of a CAD system as well, to be able to understand all the boxes and so forth. They're so prescribed. But also, I'll be getting to know a new team, getting to know all the guys and girls there and how we all work together." Now, we're by no means saying that Red Bull should have given Newey all access to the equipment at Milton Keynes. Similar to drivers on the move, engineering staff are weaned off of important information in regards to how their current teams are progressing. However, while Newey is certainly going to have a slow start at Aston Martin, realistically the 2026 regulations somewhat reduce the impact that this may have had and level the playing field. Everyone is starting from a blank slate, with new regulations being a substantial departure from the current aero regulations. So yes, while starting in March while everyone else starts in January is certainly a dampening factor on Newey's impact on the 2026 car, it's likely just the early R&D that he will miss, and it's not like the already existing team at Aston Martin are entirely incompetent. Don't get me wrong, with it being an all-new car design that will be needed for the new regulations, with it being a substantial departure from other cars, Aston Martin won't be able to fall back on the same old trick of just copying whatever worked last year for someone else. However, that being said, they will be hoping that the impact of Adrian Newey will be felt long before the preseason test in February 2026. Luckily for both Newey and the aero team, it will likely be the engines that will have a far bigger impact on the car's performance both initially and throughout the regulation cycle, and that is in the safe hands of ex-Mercedes engine lead Andy Cowell. So gardening leave does what gardening leave does. That's to be expected, right? But before he had even left the team, Red Bull appeared to make life as miserable as possible for Adrian Newey, who is known to be somewhat of an insular character. The effect of his departure was felt immediately, with the news dropping at the Miami Grand Prix weekend that Red Bull's talismanic car designer was indeed headed off for Aston Martin following months of rumors and speculation. The switch from the work he loves to the type he despises was immediate, with Newey revealing that his season changed overnight. The Miami Grand Prix itself was strange because I was there in a strategy function, hence being on the pit wall, but I wasn't involved in any of the engineering decisions or in any of the engineering meetings. I was just being wheeled around for press basically, so kind of not what gets me up. which again, you can't really fault Red Bull all that much for. It's vicious, but the "well, you're leaving so your work here is done" approach is what most teams would do. It just so happens that Newey is someone who particularly dislikes that line of work, but I mean, beggars can't be choosers, right? He was still on the payroll, and if there is any car designer you're going to make the most out of having for reputation and interviews alone, it's going to be Adrian Newey. So once again, Red Bull are just doing what any other team in their position would do. However, Adrian Newey had one last revelation that may point to something that Red Bull will want to keep a lid on, and it relates to why he decided to leave the team in the first place. According to Newey, Red Bull had gotten to the point of stagnancy, to the point where he felt that his exit may give the team the impetus to move on. But as we'll get onto in a moment, that may be a pretty bad sign for Red Bull moving forward. First, here's what Newey had to say about his exit. "I find there comes a point where I feel as if I need new challenges. The team's reached a good level of maturity, it's a very mature engineering organization as well as the rest of the team, so in a way, I've kind of done my bit. I started to feel as if we were getting a bit stale. I think the guys also felt perhaps they needed to show that they could do it on their own, so I thought, well, okay, let's give them the chance and give myself a new challenge." And what's the problem with that, you may be thinking? That sure does sound like he left for positive reasons, right? Well, I think this points towards a worrying sense of complacency at the team, which could catch them out following Newey's exit. While Newey has kindly proposed that his exit will give room for others to grow into more important roles and afford opportunities for people, that doesn't necessarily mean it will go well. While of course it was likely coincidence that Red Bull experienced a complete nosedive in the months following the announcement of his departure and subsequent distancing from operations, the calls from Max Verstappen that the team simply has to do better will certainly put pressure on the new promotions and entrants to the team in the design department. If we were to adorn our tinfoil hats about this, we'd propose that Red Bull were trying to buy themselves time by delaying Newey's start at Aston. The rumours of the pull that Aston Martin may have in regards to attracting Max Verstappen have been gaining more and more traction in recent months. And at a time where they were in the midst of the Horner controversy and a massive power struggle at the top of the team, Red Bull may have seen the exodus of many members, including Newey, as a real threat to their stability. They'll be doing all that they can to prove that the team that have the engines that won him championships, the designer that won him championships, and the engine designer that kept him from competing for championships in the old regulations are less desirable to Max Verstappen than staying at the tumultuous and change-laden Red Bull. By denying Newey time, Red Bull are attempting to buy themselves time. There is a very real possibility that Red Bull could suffer massively in the new regulations, as they not only experience a shake-up in the aero department with their talismanic car designer leaving, but the engine department being a brand new experiment for the team puts them at an immediate disadvantage to the more experienced competition around them. And if the worst-case scenario comes to pass, then Red Bull could see yet another high-profile exit in the new regulations.